Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Dark Verse and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto got too seductive Sensei, Anko and Kurenai trained him hard. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanatic. The next morning Naruto was even more excited than usual. Today was the day he went back to the academy to attend a meeting for the new genin. He hurried about his usual morning routine quicker than normal and hurried out the door, practically racing down the street towards the academy. He entered the room that the graduated students were meeting in, Iruka's old classroom, a little earlier than he was supposed to, and he looked at the genin already there. Sasuke Tem was already there, brooding as he looked out the window to his left, not even acknowledging three fangirls that were trying to get his attention, Amy and her two friends. Shino was in the back, talking to one of his bugs, just as Kiba, who was sitting next to him, was talking to his companion, Akamaru. Hinata sat in the far left corner of the class alone, and was carefully avoiding eye contact with Naruto. In front of her was Daichi, who grinned as he twirled a kunai on his finger while he talked with his two friends. Shikamaru and Choji walked in just as Naruto sat down, the lazier of the two commenting that the meeting was for kids who have passed, but he fell silent when Naruto showed him his forehead protector. Naruto rested his head and tried to ignore the two new arrivals, not even looking up. Most of them gathered in his seat, but he could hear two coming closer to him. Abruptly he was shoved out of his seat, and he looked up to find Sakura and Ino, both not even looking at him, hurrying to sit with Sasuke. His seat taken, Naruto turned around and found an empty seat up in the back of the class, near Hinata. He grinned at her as he sat down, but she quickly turned away, leaving him to wonder what he'd even done to the girl. Finally Iruka came in, and everyone who had been talking immediately quieted down. The scarred Chunin turned to face them all with a smile as he began a long-winded speech about responsibility and the pride of a shinobi. Finally he got to the interesting part. All of you, as new genin, will be paired up with a Junin sensei, as well as two teammates, that will make up a four-man cell. These teams will complete missions together for the majority of your shinobi careers. As you raise through the ranks, your Junin sensei will teach you new skills that will aid you in your missions. During all of this, all the genin were wondering who they were going to be teamed up with. For Naruto, he didn't really mind being with anyone but Sasuke, and he'd really like Sakura, or maybe Ino. I'll now announce your teams as well as your Junin sensei, who will be here shortly to take you to your first team meeting, announced Iruka. Team 2, under Shiranui Genma, began Iruka. Naruto sat quietly listening for his name. Iruka had already called our teams 2, 3, and 5, and he was just reaching the next. Team 7, under Hatake Kakashi. Naruto perked up at this. That name sounds familiar. Haruno Sakura, Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke. After Naruto's name was called, he gave a slight cheer, since he was teamed up with his crush. Unfortunately he was also teamed up with Sasuke Tem. He'd have to make the best of it though. Team 8, under Yuahi Kurenai. Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba. Naruto gave another twitch at the second familiar name. This one he remembered well though. Who wouldn't remember that beautiful red-eyed woman? Even if she was scary and angry. Naruto's thoughts turned towards Sakura when she was angry. Maybe just all women were scary when they were angry. That was something to investigate. Team 10, under Sarutobi Asuma. Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino. Iruka sat down in his desk, waiting for the Junin sensei to arrive. Finally, after about 10 minutes, there was a knock at the door. Iruka got up and opened it, and 5 Junin flowed in. One of them, with a senbon in his mouth, turned towards the class and called out, Team 2, with me. Another, with dark sunglasses and a bandana, called out, Team 3 I am Aoba Yamashiro. Follow me. The third Junin, who had a sword strapped to his back, coughed as he stepped forward. Team 5, with me. Next was the red-eyed woman, Yuahi Kurenai. She saw Naruto and smiled, waving towards him. Many of the remaining genin looked at Naruto oddly. How did they know each other? They weren't given much of a chance to ask any questions though as the woman called out, Team 8, come with me. Finally, the last Junin, a tall broad-shouldered man with a beard and a cigarette hanging from his mouth, called out, Team 10, meet me outside. With that, the only genin left in the room were Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto. Sakura was busy trying to get Sasuke's attention while brushing off Naruto, while Naruto was busy trying to get her attention, while Sasuke just ignored them both. It was an odd interaction. After an hour, Iruka got up with an apologetic look towards the three genin. He announced that he had to leave, and reminded them to lock the door on the way out. 2 more tortuous hours passed until Kakashi walked in, only to be hit on the head with a chalky eraser, and to see his three genin in the middle of an annoying, loud, argument with little meaning behind it. My first impression of you is, I don't like you. The man stated simply. Meet me up on the roof. The genin glared at the spot the Junin had been standing in before disappearing in a puff of smoke. They quickly went up to the roof to meet their new sensei. Quote colon 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 quote. Yuahi Kurenai lead the way to her team's training grounds silently. Inside though, she was still concerned for the young blue-eyed genin she had taken an interest in. For some reason she didn't trust Kakashi with the boy. When she finally reached training grounds 8 she turned around to get a good look at her genin team for the first time. She hadn't been paying much attention to them since she'd picked them up from the academy, as her mind was preoccupied, but now she had to put Uzumaki Naruto out of her head and work with the genin she had instead. Alright. Before we start, we should all tell each other about ourselves. I'll start. My name is Yuahi Kurenai. I enjoy genjutsu, which I'm known well for my mastery of, and I love to create new genjutsu and play mind games. I dislike simple-minded people who don't bother to see the finer details of matters. She paused as an image of Naruto flashed in her mind. My dream is to be recognized as one of, if not the best, genjutsu user in the shinobi nations. Little did she know that as she had paused earlier, the young kunoichi on her team had the same image of Uzumaki Naruto flash through her own mind as well. Naruto-kun. One of her genin stepped forward and looked silently at her in askance. Kurenai nodded, telling him to go ahead. I am known as Aburame Shino. I enjoy reason and logic, as well as order and structure. I pride myself on being able to draw detailed, accurate, conclusions on matters quickly. I also enjoy cataloging new species of bugs in Konoha. I don't like people who are illogical or unnecessarily loud. As one writer once said, the habit of common and continuous speech is a symptom of mental deficiency. Dreams are illogical. Kurenai nodded. The genin's introduction was to be expected from an Aburame. Next was the Inuzuka Kiba, a genin of slightly shorter stature than Shino, but more broad-shouldered. He had the typical twin Inuzuka clan tattoos on his face, in the shape of fangs that ran from just below his eyes down to his jawline. He wore a grin as he stepped up to speak. I'm Inuzuka Kiba. I like. For a second Kurenai could have sworn his eyes glanced in Hinata's direction, but she dismissed it as her imagination. Akamaru, and training. I dislike overly strong smells. My dream is to be the strongest Inuzuka. He finished. That left the kunoichi on her team. Kurenai looked over to the girl and noticed that she wouldn't meet her eyes, and she was playing with her finger. I'm Hyuga Hinata, she stuttered horribly. Like. The girl trailed off here, as she blushed, but continued on, evenly more shakily than before. I admire a person who is very strong and kind, but few people are realize it. He inspires me to be strong. I dislike people who judge others, and my dream is to make my father proud. Kurenai gave the shy girl a small comforting smile, all while wondering who had caught the girl's eye and whether the boy was among the genin team and he was making her shy or not. She also didn't fail to notice how Hinata had stuttered a bit more on the word father than others. Odd to see a Hyuga, normally a very proud clan, to have such a shy person in their number. Dismissing the line of thought, Kurenai focused on the task at hand, the real genin exam. Now that we've gotten past the introductions, it is time for me to explain what we'll be doing today. She smiled as all the genin visibly straightened and gave her their undivided attention. I'm going to see if you truly are ready to be genin, by testing you. If you fail, you will be sent back to the academy for another year. Kiba shout out, what? We already passed a test in the academy to get here. Yes. You passed a test to see if you had what it takes to be a genin. I will decide if you will stay one. Keep in mind that this test has a high failure rate, and all genin teams will be receiving a similar one from their new Junin sensei. The red-eyed Junin watched as different emotions played across each genin's face before all of them settled on one thing, determination. Since this team has been formed on the basis of information gathering, a Hyuga with Byakugan, a Inuzuka with a superior sense of smell, and an Aburame with bugs to scout with, I will be giving you a test similar to a mission you might receive from the Hokage one day, explained Kurenai. Quickly she tried to think of a suitable task. One that would require them to seek out information that's not too available and act on it. Suddenly, she found a way to settle her worries about Uzumaki Naruto. Your mission, she said with a nearly unnoticeable smirk, is to find one of the Junin sensei of Konoha. His name is Hitaki Kakashi, and has silver hair and one eye covered. You will be finding as much as you can about him and his team. The most important things are where he is testing his team, what his test is, and how he handles his team. You'll analyze as much as you can without them knowing of this and report back to me. Kurenai gave them all a smile, and told them to start. Now I just need to wait and see. She turned around to see Anko sitting in a tree, twirling a kunai. She was smirking as she looked down at her red-eyed friend. Already sending your team of babies to spy over your interest. Kurenai sent a glare to her friend. It's not like that and you know it. She sighed as she continued, I guess you already know how the teams turned out. Anko nodded and jumped down out of the tree. I heard from Aruka, the teacher at the academy. He's actually kind of cute, I've noticed. Still, I need to check out the man you seem to be so interested in, Kurenai-chan. Who knows, maybe I'll have to have my own taste, she laughed. Kurenai ignored the teasing. It's not like she'd get Anko to stop. Well, how about we go watch Kakashi's teams ourselves? I'm going to need to make sure that what my genin team reports back is accurate, anyway. Anko smirked again as she put her kunai back in its holster. Sure. I want to see this guy you've got your panties in a bunch for anyway. We can take our time to get there though. Why do you say that? Kakashi is always late. Quote colon 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 quote. So, I think we should all try and get to know each other a little bit. Why don't you all introduce yourselves? You know, likes, dislikes, dreams, stuff like that, asked Kakashi. The pink-haired genin hesitantly spoke up. Why don't you start, sensei? Kakashi blinked. Alright, let's see, my name is Hitaki Kakashi. My likes, my dislikes, maybe some other time. My dreams, well, that's really none of your business. I have lots of hobbies. Okay. Now you, Pinky. Sakura sweat dropped at the lack of information they got from their new sensei, but began her own introduction anyway. My name is Haruno Sakura. My likes are, she looks over at Sasuke and giggles. My dislikes are, she glares at Naruto. In my dream, she looks over at Sasuke again and squeals. Kakashi nodded, hiding his disappointment. Okay. You next, the broody one. Sasuke glared at Kakashi for the nickname he received, but decided to get this over with. Uchiha Sasuke. I don't have many likes, but there are a lot of things I don't like. My dream, or more of an ambition, is to revive my clan, and to kill a certain man. Kakashi grinned at the Uchiha's answer. It was predictable, but noteworthy. Good. Now you, the weird kid. Scowling at Kakashi, Naruto crossed his arms and said simply, Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, I hate stupid villagers, and I'm going to become Hokage. I have an idiot who thinks he can become Hokage. I hear he's a bit creative on the spot at least. A rabid fangirl with no field skills at all, and I have the broody Uchiha, but at least he might actually amount to something. Kakashi sighed as he thought this, and decided he'd give his team his typical bell test. Alright, meet me at Training Ground 7. We're going to have a test to see if you're really ready to be genin or not. The three genin sat stupidly as the man disappeared again in a puff of smoke. I thought we already passed the test to be genin. Naruto asked his two new teammates. Sasuke just humphed and started heading towards the training grounds, while Sakura followed, not even paying attention to Naruto. When they had finally reached the training grounds, they found their sensei waiting for them on top of one of the training posts. Yo, he greeted. The three genin just stood there, waiting for their weird sensei to explain the test. The older man took our two bells. These are your objective. You will have, he took out an alarm clock and put it on top of the post next to him. 2 hours to get them from me. But sensei, Sakura called out, there's 3 of us, and only 2 bells. Kakashi nodded. Exactly. 2 bells for 2 people. The person who doesn't get the bell, will be sent back to the academy and repeat another year. At these words, determination filled Naruto. There was no way he was getting sent back to the academy. He was already a year behind, and he wasn't about to end up being 2 years behind. He eyed his 2 teammates, secretly hoping that it was the Uchiha that bit the dust. A team with just him and Sakura, well, excluding the Junin for the moment, would be a dream come true, except without the dating part. But he'd settle for a team with just him and Sakura. Sakura was clearly concerned, biting her lip as she eyed the bells. She glanced at Sasuke. There was no way she could get a bell over him. He was the rookie of the year. That left Naruto. She could beat Naruto. Besides, if it was Naruto that was gone, then she's have Sasuke-kun to herself on the team. Sasuke just folded his arms. I wish it was only 1 bell. Then I wouldn't be stuck with either of these idiots. He thought about it for a moment before coming up with a solution. He'd just have to take both bells for himself. Kakashi watched the emotions flicker across each student's face, and nearly laughed at how easily he deceived them. He held up his hand above his head and bringing it down sharply, shouted, "Begin." All 3 genin hurried away to hide themselves, waiting for an opportunity. Seems they at least understand the basics. Wait. Kakashi turned to see that Naruto was charging at him, shouting, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Kakashi's eyes widened at the student's ability to use such a high-level jutsu. His shock faded quickly though and the Junin fell into a stance, ready to fend off the clones. 4 clones came in at Kakashi, 2 of them sliding from either side, aiming to slam their heels into his kneecaps. A painful tactic. He jumped up above either of them and managed to whip his leg back into one of the clones' neck to his right, while letting the other on his left slide under him. He landed on his knee, directly on top of the clone's stomach. It gasped in pain and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Getting up quickly, Kakashi used smoke as cover from the other two clones that were charging him. One had pulled out 3 kunai and threw them at him as he got up, while the other just charged with its fist pulled back. He grabbed the fist that flew by his face and yanked the clone in front of himself to block the 3 kunai, and then quickly jumped through the smoke that appeared to deal with the 4th clone. With all the clones finished, Kakashi calmly turned around to face the blue-eyed genin. Is that all you have? And here I thought you'd have some skill at least, if you could use the Kage Bunshin. Guess I was wrong. Naruto bristled with anger and was about to charge in again, forgetting his reason for using Kage Bunshin, when the Junin reached into his pouch. Instead Naruto stopped and got into a ready position. Is he pulling out weapon? Except Kakashi wasn't pulling out any weapon. Instead he pulled out an orange book. He flipped it open to a page and said, "I'm ready when you are." I figured I might as well read if I'm not going to have a challenge. Naruto roared in fury and charged Kakashi. The Junin sighed at the one-track mind of the genin. He grabbed both arms of the genin and held him there as he looked into his eyes. I would think by now that you'd understand, you can't beat me so easily. To his surprise, the genin just smirked. Kakashi's eyes widened as he heard the distinct sound of someone drawing kunai from behind him. When he tried to jump away, the genin simply held onto his arms, much as he had been doing before. 3 kunai impaled themselves into his back, and he let out a gasp of pain, but just as Naruto thought he'd gotten a hit on the Junin, the man puffed into a log, leaving Naruto to curse by himself in the field. Kakashi watched the genin begin to look for him, finally heading off in the opposite direction. That had been an interesting idea, and against another genin probably would have worked, but Kakashi had known pretty quickly what he'd intended. He turned and decided to see what the other brats were up to. Naruto hit a nearby tree. Damn it, I wasn't fast enough. Brat, get a bell and I'll consider giving you a little gift. I'll give you another if you manage to hit him a bit, growled the Kyuubi, who was thoroughly pissed at the Junin's insult to Naruto with the book. Naruto grinned at the fox's offer, already coming up with a new idea to get the Junin. Hey, I need to find Sasuke, Tem and Sakura. Quote colon 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 quote. Sasuke frowned as he heard Sakura's scream. That made 2 of his teammates that their Junin sensei had beat. Weak idiots, he thought. He decided that the older ninja was simply going after each one of them. That meant that Sasuke should just let the Junin find him in an area that he wanted to fight at. He chose a small clearing that left little room for maneuvering. Sasuke already knew that the Junin was faster than he was, so he had to make it a small area so the Junin wouldn't be able to move much. Abruptly he felt a presence directly behind him. It seems you're the last one, said Kakashi. You may have taken out those 2, but I'm not like them, said Sasuke, not even bothering to face the Junin. Sasuke had barely finished speaking when he turned around and blew a huge Kaden Gokaku no Jutsu at the Junin, whom barely managed to use Kawarimi to get out of the blast. Sasuke turned again and closed in on the recovering Junin, determined to get both bells. Kurenai and Anko watched the genin of Team 7 slowly fail their Junin's test. Looks like Kakashi isn't going easy on them, even with the Uchiha he wanted so badly, muttered Anko. Kurenai sighed. Well, it's not over yet. I hear Kakashi usually gives them another chance after the time's up. Besides, it looks like both the Uchiha and Naruto each had their own little strategies to actually make Kakashi work a little. Anko nodded. I'm surprised at the brat's Kage Bunshin. He must have some huge chakra reserves. She glanced at Kurenai. You really did pick an interesting one. Both women watched as Naruto began to set up several traps, covering the clearing he was in, which was smaller than what the Uchiha had chosen to battle Kakashi in. When he was done, Naruto quickly sent 2 clones off, telling them each to find Sasuke and Sakura and bring them here. Did he figure out he needs to use teamwork? Asked Kurenai. Anko, curious, sent her own clones after Naruto's. After a few moments, she chuckled. Doesn't seem like it. He told them to come to the clearing, but he didn't say anything about teamwork. It won't matter though. The Uchiha refused. The Haruno said she'd come if Sasuke did. Kurenai frowned at Team 7's actions so far. Every year there was one team that ended up this way, one with the top of the class and the lowest in the class, as well as a fangirl. In all the years, there has never been a successful team made this way. Even the Sannin, well-known and powerful ninja in their own right, ended up with a nuke nin. She was broken out of her thoughts when Anko nudged her with her elbow. Looks like the brats really thought this out, she said, pointing at the blonde-haired genin, who was hiding several clones in the trees surrounding the area. We're going to have to be careful his clones don't see us. Kurenai nodded, and she and her friend both backed off a bit as they saw the real Naruto lead Kakashi into the clearing. The Junin was still reading his book, looking very nonchalant as he blocked all of Naruto's punches and kicks. Time is running out, remarked Kakashi, his eyes not even leaving the book. And I honestly doubt you're going to miraculously become a better shinobi suddenly. Naruto smirked, something Kakashi barely noticed. Then try this. He yelled, and summoned several shadow clones to charge at Kakashi, who just sighed at the same repetitive move. Doing the same thing over and over again won't yield different results. I'm beginning to wonder what I can do to get through that abnormally thick skull of Yo. Kakashi was cut off as he was dog-piled by the clones, one arm just holding his book above the sea of clones as if he was keeping it from harm. At the same time, the clones Naruto had hiding around the clearing set off the traps, which shot kunai and shuriken at the pile, which abruptly dispelled, and in the process knocked the orange book out of Kakashi's hand. The seasoned Junin had to make a very difficult choice then. One of his most difficult choices ever. Does he save himself from harm, or does he reach down and save his book from harm, while risking his own well-being? He dived down on top of his book and managed to quickly use Doden, Doryuheki to block the kunai from harm. Those moments, however, were all Naruto needed to go through the seals for the Baruzuruku no Jutsu, berserker technique, he'd learned from the Forbidden Scroll. As he finished, he could feel his own strength increase dramatically, his own energy seemed to boost as though he'd just eaten several soldier pills. Naruto crouched down, and with a burst of speed, charged at the earth wall in front of Kakashi and smashed through it with his fist. Kakashi had a single moment of shock as the earth wall burst apart, the shards of hardened mud blowing past him with the force of an explosion, before he was slammed backwards into a tree by Naruto. Kakashi quickly recovered though and jumped up to avoid Naruto's follow-up kick. He put his Ika book into his pouch and got serious as Naruto summoned several clones. Now was not the time to mess around. Suddenly, the alarm rang in the distance. Hiding his relief, Kakashi just announced loudly, "All right. Time is up. Meet me at the training posts from before. I'm going to have to tell the Hokage about him using that jutsu. So far he's shown that he knows 2 techniques from that scroll." As the Genin team arrived, Kakashi immediately tied Naruto up, something which Kurenai and Anko, who were still watching from a distance, became angry over since Sakura had clearly done worse. "Well, it seems none of you have to worry about going back to the academy," he announced, much to the Genin's surprise. "All 3 of you should quit being ninjas." "What?" shouted Naruto. "You heard me," said Kakashi coldly. "In case you haven't noticed, I still have the bells. Not to mention that none of you understood the true purpose of this test." "The true purpose?" Sakura asked. "You wanted us to get the bells." Sasuke was just quiet, but on the inside he was fuming. "I knew I'd be held back by these useless idiots." Naruto groaned from where he was tied up. Give us another chance, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi was silent for a moment. Fine. I'll let Sasuke and Sakura eat some lunch which I've brought. But Naruto will not be eating. What? Why? Don't question me, yelled Kakashi. I'm the rule here. If anyone gives any food to Naruto, they immediately fail. We'll continue again in 20 minutes. Quote colon 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 quote. Kurenai and Anko watched from the trees as the two genin on Team 7-8, both ignoring their teammate tied to the post. Sakura would look up every once in a while at Sasuke, as though checking to see what he was doing. The Uchiha just ignored both his hungry teammate and the girl, just eating as he normally would. Anko frowned, an odd expression to see on her normally smirking face. They're not going to pass. The brats have no sense of teamwork, they'll never figure out that they're supposed to give food to Naruto, she said. After a moment, Kurenai shook her head. No, they will. I'm going to make sure of it. Anko's eyebrows rose as she looked at her friend, but seeing what Kurenai planned, a mischievous smile appeared on her face. Ah, Kur-chan, you're so devious. Quote colon 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 quote. Shino, Hinata, and Kiba all watched from another end of the field as Team 7 went through their entire test, with Shino's bugs giving the smaller details and him reporting them to the rest of the team. Hinata didn't have to use her Byakugan as they knew where the team was and they could see them clearly, and Kiba and Akamaru's part had already finished as they were the ones who had tracked Team 7 down with their sense of smell. Ha! So Team 7's only strong member is Sasuke. Other than that they're not much, laughed Kiba. Shino glanced at his new teammate, questioning how accurate Kiba's observation was, especially with what his bugs said Naruto had done. Sasuke and Sakura had both been ignoring Naruto's pleas for food for a while when suddenly Sasuke turned around and offered his food to Naruto. When Naruto questioned him, he only said, "We're a team." Sakura, always wanting to get the approval of her crush, immediately copied Sasuke, and offered her food to Naruto. Sasuke-kun is right. You need to eat too, Naruto. During this whole time, Shino got another report from his bugs, and he stiffened. Something which both Kiba and Hinata noticed. What's up? Asked Kiba. Shino was silent for a moment. It's nothing important. It seems we're not the only people watching this match though. Kurenai-sensei and someone else are here. They're probably checking on us. Kiba and Hinata nodded, accepting his answer, before turning back to see Kakashi yelling at his genin before telling them they pass, and explaining the importance of teamwork. Shino, however, was lost in thought. Why would Kurenai-sensei be using a genjutsu? Come on, we still have to report to Kurenai-sensei and finish this test she gave us. Kiba said as he jumped off back to their own training grounds. Quote colon 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 quote. Naruto slurped down another bowl of ramen with a sigh. Ichiraku's was the best. He leaned back and patted his stomach, pretending to be full. Not that he really was though. Another bowl, miso ramen. He ordered. Coming right up, called the old man at the ramen stand. His daughter just giggled as she took Naruto's empty bowl and added it to a towering stack by the sink. You eat so much ramen, Naruto, it's amazing you aren't fat. She laughed. Naruto grinned at her in response, all while acting up a bit for another laugh. He secretly enjoyed the sound of her laugh. Something about it was pleasant. On the inside, though, another conversation was going on. I'll admit, whelp, you surprised me. I didn't actually think a weakling like you would manage to hit the bastard, laughed the fox. Naruto smirked, ignoring the weakling comment. I think you owe me a few gifts, he said in his mind. The fox's snort was so loud in his head that Naruto looked around to see if anyone nearby had heard it. He was sitting at Ichiraku's, celebrating his victory earlier. Luckily, nobody seemed to be looking at him strangely. I did promise I'd give you 2 gifts, one for getting the bell, and another for hitting the Junin. If I remember correctly, you only hit him, but never got a bell yourself, said the fox. Naruto growled over his ramen. Just like a kitsune to weasel its way out of a deal like that. Fine. What's this gift then? Tonight, when you sleep, we'll talk. Right now, you're going to have company. Naruto blinked when his conversation with the fox was cut short and he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around to see someone unexpected. You. Quote colon 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 quote. Kurenai and Anko arrived back at Training Ground 8 shortly before Kiba, Shino, and Hinata. Settling into a position that looked as though they had never left, Kurenai introduced them to her friend Anko, and asked for a report. Well, she asked. Kiba and Shino both took a step forward, ready to tell her what they heard, but paused when they noticed each other. Kurenai sighed audibly, knowing that this little struggle of power was something that she had to deal with. Finally, Shino stepped back, allowing Kiba to go on. Whether it was a sign of giving in, or just a sign of being more mature, Kurenai didn't know, but she flashed Shino a grateful smile. Well, we located Team 7 along with Hitaki Kakashi back at the academy pretty easily, with my sense of smell, bragged Kiba. We followed them to Training Ground 7, where he gave them what he called a bell test. He pulled out 2 bells and told the team whoever can get a bell from him passes, the one who doesn't get a bell fails. Good work, said Kurenai. But that wasn't much of an analysis of his test. Is that all you've found out? She asked. Kiba stood there for a moment, silently wondering what he'd missed, when Shino stepped forward. Kakashi clearly tried to divide the team by only having 2 bells in the test while there are 3 people in the team. The true purpose of the test is to make sure that they're willing to sacrifice their pride and work together to get the bells as a team, not as individuals. They fail the test if they work to get the bells for themselves because that shows they're willing to sacrifice their teammates for their own success. Kurenai blinked at Shino's thorough analysis. He clearly had a sharp mind. All right. Very good Team 8. We will start our first missions together tomorrow. You're dismissed until then. After the 3 had each left, Anko and Kurenai both started to walk in their own direction into the village. So I'll admit, I was impressed with that Uzumaki brat, Anko told her friend. I can't believe he knows Kage Bunshin, and the Berserker technique. They're both pretty chakra demanding. In fact, I'm amazed at how little the Berserker technique seemed to affect him. Kurenai nodded absently, as she also thought of the blue-eyed Genin. I'm glad his team made Genin though. Yeah, all thanks to you, laughed Anko. Kurenai smiled. Perhaps. I'm fairly confident that Naruto would have fed either of his teammates had their positions been reversed. Oh, well, here's your chance to find out for yourself, exclaimed Anko. Leaning in, she whispered in her friend's ear, and your chance for a date with your little crush. She pushed Kurenai off to the side on the street, and Kurenai reached out blindly to grab hold of something to steady herself, unwittingly grabbing Uzumaki Naruto's shoulder. The genin turned around quickly, his eyes wide. You, he said. The boy blushed suddenly and scratched the back of his head. I mean, hi, Kurenai-san. Kurenai shot Anko a glare at the awkwardness she had caused, but Anko merely smiled and walked into the ramen stand and ordered a bowl, ready to watch the spectacle. The red-eyed genin steadied her emotions and shot a warm smile down at the boy. Hello, Naruto. Kurenai-sensei is fine, by the way. I just wanted to congratulate you on becoming a genin. Thanks, Kurenai-sensei, said Naruto with a grin. It was tough, but my team managed to pass Kakashi's test. Oh, asked Kurenai. And what was Kakashi's test this time? We had to get these bells from the jerk. But there were only 2 of them and it tricked us. We thought that no matter what one of us would fail, so we all worked against each other, but Kakashi-sensei wanted us to work as a team. Kurenai faked a bit of shock and over-exaggerated her interest. And you guys managed to get the bells? Naruto frowned and prodded his ramen with his chopsticks. No. In the end Kakashi tied me to the stump because he thought I did the worst on the team. He gave Sakura and Sasuke lunch and said I wasn't allowed to eat. Eventually for whatever reason Sasuke-tem decided to let me eat, since we're a team. That's when Kakashi allowed us to pass. He said we should all thank Sasuke-tem. Anko looked over and could see Kurenai's fists clench. She's probably still mad that Naruto was the one to get tied up, when he was the only one to actually hit Kakashi, as well as the fact that her genjutsu ended up making Kakashi like Sasuke even more. Deciding to step in, Anko put her arm around Naruto, who turned quickly to see her lick her lips, something Naruto found oddly attractive. I'm Anko, Kurenai's friend. I can't believe you passed, Naruto-kun, she purred. You must be an awfully strong genin. She scooted her stool just a bit closer to Naruto, who was starting to become a little uncomfortable, especially when he realized that her proximity gave him a wonderful view. Luckily, he was saved by Kurenai. Anko, I think Naruto might need a little room. Anko pouted. Ah, you're no fun, Kurenai-chan. I was just having a bit of fun. But she moved back nonetheless. Naruto, I also came here because I want to give you an offer, said Kurenai. Seeing that she had Naruto's full attention, she smiled as she continued. This isn't typically done. Normally Junin sensei only teach the 3 genin on their team, but I've decided that I want to help you learn chakra control. If you want to, I'd like you to keep this to yourself for now, as I'm sure that Kakashi would be a little angry at the whole idea. What do you say? Naruto thought for a moment, his eyes glazing over as he stared down at the counter. Anko and Kurenai shared a look over his head as he thought. Finally, Naruto looked back up with a big grin. Sure, Kurenai, he said. I'd love to. Good. I'll see you tomorrow after your team's first missions. Meet me at training grounds 8. She said. Oh, and Naruto, it's Kurenai-sensei, said Kurenai. I won't be helping someone who's disrespectful. Naruto gulped at the cold look the red-eyed Junin shot him as he was quickly reminded of how scary she was when she was angry. Hi, Kurenai-sensei. Later that day, after reiterating his story to every person her could find, including Ayame, old man Ichiraku, and Iruka, the blue-eyed genin slowly prepared for bed. He needed to wake up earlier than normal now that he was on a team, being trained by a second Junin, as well as practicing his own skills himself with Kage Bunshin. He still hadn't figured anything out with the immolation technique he'd copied down, and he'd need to use the Kage Bunshin more to figure it out. When he'd finally laid down in his bed, he was almost immediately pulled into his own mind to see the Kyuubi. He glanced around at his dripping wet surroundings and wet clothes, and willed his clothes to be dry. Surprisingly, it worked. Not really stopping to think of the implications, Naruto walked down the hall to where he knew the fox would be. So the weakling arrives, sneered the fox. Ready for your winnings. Naruto grinned and nodded. That is if the furball actually keeps its promises. He sighed dramatically. I suppose we'll just have to hope. The fox roared indignantly. I always keep my promises, whelp. And one day, I swear, I'll make you beg me for mercy. Naruto smirked. Alright, now, what's this gift you were talking about? Eyeing him quietly, the fox began to explain. I'm going to allow you to use Kitsune eyes. There. Awesome, shouted Naruto. You're going to give me a dujutsu. You can do that, really? Silence. The fox roared, pacing within its cage. No, I am not giving you a dujutsu. I am giving you the ability to use Kitsune eyes. They aren't inherited like a blood limit, and they're not so specialized like the Sharingan or Byakugan which you are familiar with. The fox paused for a moment to let the information sink in. What they will do, however, is amplify your killing intent to a crippling level, similar to my own. They will also amplify whatever your current genjutsu abilities are, as Kitsune are naturally gifted in illusions. Seeing the astounded look on the boy's face, the fox paused again. However, seeing as your genjutsu is dismal at the moment, it won't amount to much. Naruto just stood there, his mouth agape, as the fox went on. You will activate them by pushing some of my chakra to your eyes. When you use a lot of my chakra, the eyes will naturally come to you. Naruto, finally gaining his voice and gathering his thoughts, asked, but how do I use your chakra? The fox gave a barking laugh. Not my problem. I never agreed to teach you how to use it. You'll have to figure it out on your own, or else make another deal with me. Angered at being tricked, Naruto kicked a large puddle of water at the fox, only to be amazed as it turned into a huge wave and smacked into the fox, leaving it soaking wet. What the hell? He thought, ignoring the fox's screaming. Putting the weird puddle aside, Naruto thought about the deal for a moment. What could the fox want? I'll probably be able to find this out fine on my own. I might as well see what it wants though, just to be sure. Fine. What would I have to do for you to tell me? He asked. The fox smirked, or as near to a smirk as it could with its jaws. See that seal? Tear a portion of it off. Naruto didn't even have to think about it. No deal. He said. I'll find out how to use your chakra on my own, thanks. The fox's only answer was mirthless laughter as Naruto left his mind. Quote colon 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 quote. Meanwhile, the Hokage was just beginning to hold a meeting with the Junin of the various rookie genin teams. Come in. He answered when he heard a knock on his door, which opened to reveal the Junin, including Kakashi, surprisingly. Ah, I see you're all here, he said around his pipe. So then, ignoring Kakashi's rare punctuality, let's begin. Genma, why don't you begin? Asked the Hokage. Genma stepped forward. Team 2 failed, Hokage-sama. Then Aoba. Team 3, passed. Hayate was next. Team 5 also fails, Hokage-sama. Kakashi stepped forward, eyes on his book. Team 7, he trails off, knowing he was building a bit of suspense. Quote. Passes. Surprised shouts of, what? Echoed in the room at Kakashi's answer. You've never passed a team before, Kakashi. Remarked Genma. Asuma took out another cigarette. This must be some type of miracle. The Hokage chuckled, agreeing that this was an odd occurrence. He looked over at Kurenai, whom he knew interfered with Kakashi's test. He had been watching with his crystal, after all. She was just standing there with a wide smile, probably happy that the boy she wanted to train ended up making it to Genin. The old man cleared his throat, and the Junins quieted down immediately. It is truly good news to hear that you've passed a team, Kakashi. However, I believe we need to move along. At this, Kurenai stepped forward, still smiling. Team 8 passes, Hokage-sama. And finally, Asuma. Team 10 also passes, pops. Kakashi coughed lightly, getting everyone's attention. I'd like to bring up something that was interesting during my test with Team 7. Kurenai's eyes widened. Did Kakashi know what she'd done? Silently she prayed that it was something else. If Kakashi knew and he brought it up, Kurenai could be in a lot of trouble. One of my genin, Uzumaki Naruto, has an odd skill set. While he is unremarkable when it comes to basic shinobi skills, I found that he has at his arsenal both the Kage Bunshin and the Berserker technique, both of which are in the Forbidden Scroll, said Kakashi. What? That's impossible, shouted Aoba. That brat has never shown any skill, less than anyone on my genin team did even. Genma simply dropped the Senbon needle much like Asuma did with his cigarette, their mouths agape, and Hayate fell into a huge coughing fit. Kurenai breathed a sigh of relief as the Hokage began to respond. Yes, as you all know, Uzumaki Naruto managed to steal the Forbidden Scroll from here not too long ago, while being tricked by Mizuki. I was already aware of Naruto learning these skills. Thank you for pointing them out though, Kakashi. Kakashi raised his hand slightly, palm outward, as if forestalling the Hokage. I was also aware of the Forbidden Scroll incident, and the possibility that Naruto remembered various jutsu on it had crossed my mind. What surprised me, however, was the fact that he had time to already learn two of them, Kage Bunshin one night, and not much longer, the considerably harder and more dangerous Berserker technique. Yes. Well, as you can see, Uzumaki Naruto's statistical information does not do him justice. However, I have a feeling that Naruto had some help with that. I will look into it, Kakashi, said the Hokage. Is that all? Kakashi shook his head, and the other Junin were silent as well, many of them still getting over the idea of a genin knowing such powerful jutsu. The Hokage nodded and dismissed them, but called out to Kurenai before she left. Kurenai, I'd like to speak with you. She froze for a moment, and schooled her features before turning around. The other Junin filed out, looking at her oddly, until each of them had left. Once they were in private, the Hokage sighed loudly. Firstly, Kurenai, you should know that it is a great offense to interfere with another Junin's test. Especially at such a crucial moment, he said. Kurenai's eyes widened in shock. You knew? She asked. How? The Hokage took out the crystal ball he used, which allowed him to see various areas in the village. Once she saw it, Kurenai nodded slowly. It was obvious, and she had been foolish to think she could get away with this. However, I will not be taking action this time, Kurenai, he said to her shock. In fact, I think it will be good for Kakashi to finally have a genin team, and also, just between you and me, he winked, I wanted Naruto to be a genin as well. His expression became more serious though as he said in a no-nonsense tone, if you ever do something like this again however, I can promise you that you will be put on review and suspended of your active duty status. Kurenai nodded seriously, and heaved a huge sigh inwardly, both because she still couldn't believe she had been caught, and also in relief that she was off the hook. Thank you, Hokage-sama, she said. After Kurenai had left, the Hokage leaned back into his chair. Even when he's not pulling pranks, Naruto causes problems. He chuckled as he put his pipe aside and got up, finished with the day's work, and went to find his bed. The next day began early for Naruto, as he woke up excited about his team starting their training. He rolled over in bed, still buried in the warmth of his sheets, and turned towards the clock. He had an hour to get to the training grounds. Plenty of time. Nevertheless, he trudged out of his bed and into the shower, washing up for the new day. He dried off and put on clean clothes and walked out of the bathroom into the kitchen for some breakfast. As the instant ramen was cooking in the microwave, Naruto checked outside to see the sun shining brightly and plenty of people already up and walking around. Finally the microwave beeped and he sat down by the window and enjoyed the warmth shining through it as he ate. By the time he had to head to the training grounds, Naruto was fully awake, and because of the light stretches and exercises he had decided to do, he already had a head start on his teammates. He still managed to arrive earlier than everyone else at Training Ground 7, and went to the small bridge nearby and leaned against the railing, waiting for everyone else to show up. Sasuke was next, walking slowly and purposely to the bridge, his hands in his pockets and his head bowed. The raven-haired boy barely gave a response to Naruto's "good morning," except for a brief moment of eye contact. The Uchiha prodigy simply ignored Naruto and leaned back to wait for their sensei, spacing out and losing himself in his own thoughts. Naruto left his teammate alone, and went back to resting, his own thoughts turning to wondering how to use the Kyuubi's chakra. He'd tried several times earlier while waiting for everyone to arrive, but so far he'd only managed to gather his own. He wasn't going to keep trying while people were here either, so he decided that he'd have to wait until after all his training today to test any new ideas he might think of. Soon after, Sakura came hurrying up, still huffing from having to run from her house to the training grounds. Evidently she'd woken late, or had to put on makeup. She responded to Naruto's "good morning, Sakura-chan," even less than Sasuke did. That is, she didn't even look in his direction. Naruto ground his teeth at Sakura's constant attitude towards him, and decided something. It was a revolutionary thought in his mind, and immediately after he thought it, he wondered where it came from. Forget Sakura. She's not even worth my time with how she acts. Still blinking at the thought, Naruto watched from afar as Sakura continuously tried to engage Sasuke in conversation. If he was completely honest with himself, then he couldn't deny that she was being annoying. It was no wonder Sasuke didn't encourage her attention at all. Azure Eyes watched for the better part of an hour as Sakura never relented in her attempts, and Sasuke never acknowledged her. Sure, Naruto felt bad that Sakura was treated that way, but then he'd remember that when he tried talking to Sakura, she did to him the same thing that Sasuke normally did to her. Glad you've finally come to your senses. I was beginning to wonder how retarded you really were, the fox rumbled. Naruto imagined sending a huge splash of the water from the floor in Kyuubi's cage into the fox's face, and was glad to hear the fox spluttering. Hey, serves you right. The fox snarled. Insolent brat, I'll tear you to shreds. Naruto laughed aloud at the empty threat, making his teammates glance at him. He waved them off, but to no avail. After waiting for their late sensei for so long, Sakura wasn't going to put up with Naruto's antics. Naruto, quit being so annoying. Sasuke-kun and I are trying to have a conversation. She yelled. That nearly did it. Naruto was equally annoyed, both by their sensei's lateness, and his recent epiphany regarding Sakura. He closed his eyes and tried to calm down by slowly counting backwards. Unfortunately, he was still fuming afterwards. And when Kakashi finally did manage to show up, with a simple, "Yo," all three genins, thoroughly annoyed by each other, and their sensei's tardiness, yelled out at him, "You're late." "Ah, sorry. I got lost," he said lamely. Kakashi waved off their accusations of him lying, of all things, and announced, "Well, I was going to get our first mission today, but seeing as you guys don't seem to be up to it," he trailed off, happy to see that his genin team had shut up, eager to do the mission. Alright, off to the Hokage Tower then to get our mission assignment. Kakashi lead the way with his three genin in tow, Sasuke brooding off to the side, Sakura walking up alongside him, and Naruto, normally boisterous, was trailing behind. Curious about the strange behavior from the blonde, Kakashi decided to keep an eye on the boy during their mission. Right now though, they were reaching the Hokage's tower, where they'd get their mission. "Ah, Team 7, said the Hokage when they were admitted into the room. "Let's see here, this will be this team's first mission." "Ah yes, I have just the mission. 1D rank for a delivery." And so Naruto became familiar with the horror that were D ranks. Dreadful, traumatizing, soul-searing, excruciatingly boring missions. They were something to be feared. The first had been deliveries around Konoha. The second had been trash pickup. The third, well, that one Naruto effectively blocked out of his mind, since it was too horrible an experience. Thankfully, they finished in the afternoon, and Naruto cheered when he was finally dismissed. He started heading towards Ichiraku's, glad to finally have some time off. He smiled as he reached the small ramen stand and the old chef waved at him. To his side was his daughter, Ayame, who also waved. Ayame was a pretty girl who Naruto loved to talk to and share his stories with, as she truly seemed to enjoy them, often overlooking his little embellishments. She rarely got to left the stand and instead worked hard with her father for their money, so for her, Naruto's stories were a wonderful source of entertainment. Ayame greeted Naruto warmly as he sat down on the stool and asked him what to eat. Just as Naruto opened his mouth to order several bowls of his favorite though, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see bright red eyes. You, he gasped. Deja vu, muttered Kurenai. I thought we had an agreement, Naruto. She asked. Naruto blinked. And blinked again. Suddenly he remembered. Oh, sorry Kurenai-sensei, I completely forgot after Kakashi-sensei finally let us go. We had our first few missions today. D ranks are terrible. Kurenai frowned. Don't forget about our meeting again. I was waiting for you at the training grounds, and I was beginning to wonder if you'd picked up Kakashi's bad habits already. This time it was Naruto's turn to frown. Never. Kakashi-sensei was late for our morning training by a couple hours. It won't happen again, Kurenai-sensei. Alright, Naruto. Come with me, I need to speak with you, the older woman said. I was just about to eat, though, whined Naruto, making Kurenai laugh. I bet those D ranks tired you out, remarked Kurenai. Alright, after we have our talk, I'll treat you to ramen here before we start our training. Kurenai turned to see the old man at the ramen stand suddenly rubbing his hands together, and she wondered if she had made a mistake in offering to treat the genin. Naruto cast one regretful look back at Ayame, silently telling her he'd be back soon, and headed after Kurenai. The genin followed the taller Junin for a while, still mourning his temporary loss of a meal. The thoughts did nothing to help the pit in his stomach which seemed to grow by the minute. Being a young teenager, it was no fault of Naruto's that his mind was so stuck on food. Nor is it much of a surprise at what he was finally distracted by. Since he was shorter than the woman he was walking with, his stride was not as long, letting him walk just behind her and giving him a beautiful view. Not that he stared. Lately though, Naruto had definitely been noticing women more and more, and he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. It had led to some compromising positions at times, though luckily he had managed to save himself from any awkwardness so far. Right now there wasn't any problem. Kurenai was beautiful, and he was freely admitting that to himself at the moment, as he watched her surreptitiously. Her hips, which were hugged tightly in the wrappings she wore, swayed as she walked, and Naruto couldn't help but look. Abruptly Kurenai stopped, and Naruto nearly walked into her in a daze before stopping himself quickly. He looked up to ask what was wrong, and she said over her shoulder, Naruto, this is where we'll be meeting from now on, and I expect you to be here promptly. Now, first thing is first, I'm going to have to practice your chakra control, since that is a weak point of yours and is vital to any type of genjutsu. Naruto nodded and listened closely as she explained the exercise to him. It wasn't difficult. At least, it didn't seem hard at all. She explained the common ways to improving chakra control, water walking, tree climbing, and went on to say that unfortunately, Naruto wasn't quite ready for that. She picked up a leaf, and held it to him. As I explained before, in the tree climbing exercise you use chakra to stick to the side of the tree as you climb it. In water walking, you use chakra to repel yourself from the water. What I want you to do, is use your chakra to pull instead of stick or repel. You are going to being picking leaves off of the ground with your chakra from your fingertips. Naruto groaned. How is picking up leaves going to help? Kurenai shot him a sharp glare, and Naruto gulped. I mean, I'll do it. The glare turned to an overly happy smile. Good. I'm glad you see my way. After you can pick up the leaves from the ground with no problem, you'll be picking up kunai from the ground instead, and when you master that, I'll show you a useful skill this can give you. Naruto's disappointment evaporated with those words. All he had to do was master this, and she'd teach him a jutsu. Immediately he set out to his task with fervor, taking the leaf Kurenai handed to him and putting it on the ground. Unfortunately, he found himself unable to pick up the leaf from the ground. His frustration grew as he showed little progress, and was there for nearly an hour before he could complete the simple task of getting it off the ground. He found that simply putting the chakra on the tip of your fingers doesn't make it do anything, the leaf will just stay as it is and he'll keep using chakra. The trick, he found, was to continuously move the chakra inwards on his fingertips. The outside of his fingers would bring the chakra out, and in the center he would move it back inside his finger, making a donut-like shape, which is constantly inverting itself. Naruto also realized that if he applied too little chakra, then no matter how well he manipulates it, the chakra won't have enough force to pull the leaf in. If he applies too much, the leaf folds in on itself as the chakra tries to pull it into his finger, as though too much gravity had acted on the leaf. Off to the side, Kurenai watched Naruto's gradual improvement, offering small tips when she saw fit, telling him to stay calm, to focus on moving the chakra as well as the strength, but most of all, she offered encouragement. Anko watched with her, having been looking for Kurenai to ask her friend to join her for Dango, and instead ended up joining Kurenai for Naruto's training. She lounged on the ground in the shade by a tree, eating an apple as the genin eventually got the hang on the chakra exercise. Unlike Kurenai, however, she didn't offer encouragement. She didn't tell him helpful tips or hint at what he should be doing for success. Instead, she munched on her apple and held a loud conversation with Kurenai, often criticizing Naruto's failures, making small jabs at his weak points. In her mind, the harsh comments served a few purposes. One of them was a test. She wanted to make sure the boy had some backbone and actually deserved her respect and help before she offered any. Another was actually a form of help in itself, although not many would see it that way. Her harsh comments would point out Naruto's failures and weak points loudly, so that Naruto could hear her talking about them quite clearly. Hopefully, in addition to angering him and maybe finally provoking him enough to prove himself to Anko, it would make him realize what he needed to work on, and in the end, he'd be much improved. Naruto, meanwhile, tried to ignore her loud comments while he continued practicing, focusing only on his own chakra and the leaf he was trying to hold with it. Of course, one of the key elements to successful chakra manipulation is being calm, since anger is a rough and uncontrollable emotion, and it reflects in your chakra. Soon his hard-earned progress began to dwindle as he became more and more aggravated with Anko, and then became increasingly frustrated that he was not succeeding. When Kurenai finally called him to a stop, he thankfully held his anger back and settled for a glare rather than bashing her face in, Kurenai's friend or not. The day ended with Kurenai having significantly less money than she is comfortable with, and Naruto lying in bed exhausted, but proud of himself. The days came and went. Naruto began to stick to a routine. Wake up, eat, head out to meet Team 7. Missions. Training on his own. Training with Kurenai. He made progress quickly in chakra manipulation, as well as a few jutsu he'd needed to brush up on. He could finally complete a bunshin properly. He didn't use it much though, he had Kage Bunshin. Which, incidentally, he'd been using to try and perfect the berserker technique, as well as learn the immolation technique. So far he'd only managed to make the berserker technique more efficient for him, but the immolation technique remained elusive. The most he could do is create tiny flames, which would appear randomly on any part of his body. So far he'd never been able to do much more of a flame than what would be created by a match, much less envelope his body. On top of that, the flames had the odd habit of appearing in odd places, once on his rear in fact, which ended up in him singeing his chair. Nevertheless, he kept practicing, and also trying to think of ways to bring out the Kyuubi's chakra. He hadn't had any luck though. The day soon came however when Kurenai finally switched him from leaves to kunai. The idea being that a heavier object is more difficult to pull to yourself with chakra. It proved to be true. So far, he hadn't managed to make the kunai stick to his fingers. He would drive the kunai into the ground, and then try to remove it by placing his fingertip on the edge of the handle and pulling with chakra. So far, nothing had budged. Anko had been having a field day. Ha! No wonder he was dead last. She nearly yelled. He can't control his chakra any more than a first-year academy student. He might as well not even be able to gather it up. Naruto ground his teeth, ignoring Anko, and gathering a bit more chakra to the tip of the kunai. He could feel it attach and he began to slowly bring it out of the ground. It wasn't budging easily. And here I thought since he's going to be Hokage and all, he'd at least have some skill. But instead, he probably shouldn't even be a ninja. He could feel it. It slowly began to wiggle out of the earth, rising from the ground, stained with dirt and grass. Idly he wondered what it would be like to pull a kunai out of a body, and how much more stained it would be. You shouldn't have wasted your time with the failure, Kurenai-chan. That did it. Overwhelming emotions filled him, and Naruto could feel the kunai suddenly give way to his chakra, as he yanked it out of the ground, throwing his entire body weight back and swinging around quickly, whipping his arm, and he flung the kunai at the snake mistress, who was still smiling stupidly at her own words. Pretty girl or not, I'll still kick you for saying that. He screamed. Anko, even when caught off guard, didn't even blink at the kunai flying towards her. If anything, her smile grew wider and she rose her hand as if to catch the kunai, but held one finger out, with which she used chakra to grab onto the handle and fling it right back at Naruto, who didn't have any time to dodge. It flew right by his face and cut a long thin line on his cheek, and suddenly he felt Anko standing right behind him. She put an arm around him and leaned down over her shoulder. So the little baby does have some backbone. I was beginning to worry that all I was doing was hurting his little feelings. She licked the blood running down his cheek with a smirk, and he gave an involuntary shudder at the feeling. Abruptly Anko kicked him, hard, in the back and sent him flying forward. Face in the dirt, he could hear her say quite clearly from where he had just been standing. I was just expecting you to snap back at me, but not attack me, but since you so kindly offered for a spar, I accept. Naruto didn't have any time to move before Anko had already kicked him, hard, in the stomach, sending him flying to a tree trunk. As soon as he had landed at its base, Anko was already there, and it was beyond Naruto to make any sort of strong blocks or attacks of his own as Anko threw punches and kicks. It finally ended when Kurenai stepped in, putting Naruto behind her. Ah, and I was just getting to the good part, whined Anko. Clearly he can't keep up with that pace, Anko. What were you trying to do? Put him in the hospital, demanded Kurenai. Anko just spread her hands and shrugged, saying, well, I figured he should learn not to attack a Junin, it might serve as a useful lesson someday. His taijutsu truly was worse than I expected though, she muttered. Naruto sent her baleful glare from the ground, something she didn't fail to see. Oh, and even after taking such a beating he's still got some spunk to him. I like that, said Anko. She trailed off though when she saw Naruto's face. And look here, it seems your face already healed up. Interesting. She stood up and had a new gleam in her eyes. And what's this about me being a pretty girl? She asked teasingly. Well, I have to admit, I am awfully good looking. She struck a pose that clearly accentuated her features, and licked her lips slowly, letting Naruto take it all in with wide eyes, before he shook his head to clear any thoughts and was once again saved by Kurenai. Just ignore her teasing, Naruto. And try not to look. I don't approve of perverts, she said and started to lead him away. Behind her, Anko whined. Ah, but I wanted him to look. Besides, you're just stealing him, Kurenai-chan. She joked. Once they were a little away from Anko, Kurenai told Naruto that since he'd gotten to pull the kunai out once, she'd finally teach him if he could do it again, proving he had a mastery over it. Ah, but you said you'd teach me the jutsu once I managed to do it, claimed Naruto. Kurenai frowned. I never said anything about a jutsu, it's a skill you'll be able to use in different situations with this chakra manipulation. Naruto paused for a moment. Huh, what do you mean? Never mind. Just do the kunai exercise. I'll think about giving you a jutsu as well as the kunai skill. Right now, I'm going to go talk to Anko though. While Naruto got his kunai out and began the exercise again, Kurenai walked over to Anko, who was lounging in the shade again to watch. I can understand the comments from earlier to get him rile up, but was the teasing necessary? She asked. Anko smirked at her. Of course. Would I be Mitarashi Anko if I didn't do it? She asked. Besides, he clearly has been giving you plenty of looks, so when he called me pretty, I had to make sure he got a real good look of me. What? He's been checking me out? Asked a furious Kurenai. I hate perverts. She spun around to go give Naruto a piece of her mind, but Anko stopped her. Hey, calm down, Kur-chan. He's 13 years old. I don't think it would be a good idea to beat something out of him that's natural for a kid his age. Kurenai glared at her. And you'd encourage it so he becomes a pervert? Naturally. Smirked Anko. Although I don't think he's a pervert. But here's the test. I'm just going to take off my shirt. As she was saying this, Anko began to pull off the fishnet shirt, but this time it was Kurenai's turn to stop her friend from doing something stupid. What are you doing? She hissed. Stop it. I'm serious. Anko pouted. Ah, it would have been fun to see the look on the kid's face. He'd probably faint. Unless you're going to be helping, and not trying to turn him into something like Kakashi, then I think you should leave, Anko. Hey, don't push me away so quickly, Kur-chan. I'll help, don't worry. She had to hold up her hands in an innocent gesture. And I won't do anything perverted. I'm going to help his taijutsu. He has horrible form. Kurenai nodded, and the two of them walked over to Naruto, who was now easily completing the kunai exercise. Good, Naruto. You can stop now. Naruto stood up straight, having been bent over towards the kunai, and he faced the two Junin with a smile. Alright, Kurenai-sensei. What are you going to teach me next? You've already seen the skill I told you about. Anko here used it when you threw the kunai at her. Do you remember what it is? Naruto thought for a moment, but realized he couldn't picture it. She just threw it back at me. No, she stopped it with her chakra, using the same concept that you're using to pull the chakra out of the ground. Since chakra can be used to pull things to you, it's essentially making things stick to you. You can even make someone's first stick to you with your chakra, although this won't make a ninja stick to you long, since they will easily be able to counter it and move again, but it might give you a moment of surprise, explained Kurenai. Naruto scowled. That won't help me at all in a fight. Anko laughed, and Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Oh really? Then try and move, she said, laying her hand on his shoulder. Naruto instantly tried to jump away, but only his legs went, and his shoulder stuck to Kurenai's hand, making him basically belly flop the ground. He growled and stood up after Kurenai let him go. Now, there are other things you can do with the concepts from these chakra manipulation exercises. For me to show you this one though, I want you to try and hit me, she said. Naruto hesitated for a moment, but he was already angry at having been brought to the ground so easily, and he went for it. Kurenai didn't even move. She stood in place, and he watched his fist move closer and closer to her gorgeous face, but when it got closer, his fist suddenly veered off to the side, missing her completely. He openly gaped. He'd missed a still target. In front of him, Kurenai and Anko both stood with identical smirks. As you can see, Naruto, you missed. If you're confused as to why, it's because I used my chakra to push your fist out of the way. At the moment, your brute strength isn't enough to overcome my chakra pushing your fist, but if you were someone with more strength, or with chakra control that could interrupt mine, then you wouldn't have had a problem hitting me. Anko nudged him in the shoulder. So you and I are going to be working on your taijutsu together sometimes, which will improve those flabby muscles. She pinched his biceps as she said that, making him jerk his arm away. That is how his practices finished, and Naruto found that his increased chakra control was going to have huge benefits, especially if he could use it to avoid attacks. So far Kurenai had already told him that tomorrow she'd be starting him on tree climbing, which was very similar to the kunai exercise, though on a much bigger scale and more difficult because it was on his feet. And by the time he knew water walking well, he'd be able to use chakra to help him in a bunch of ways in fights, not just making his jutsu more efficient. Quote colon 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 quote. The next day brought some even better news though. He had been waiting with Sasuke and Sakura at Training Ground 7 for a few hours already, giving Naruto time to discreetly practice pulling a kunai out of the ground while sitting at the base of a tree, while Sasuke was busy brooding and Sakura was busy trying to talk to Sasuke. Kakashi finally appeared though, ignoring Sakura's loud accusations, and announced that they were heading to the Hokage to get their next mission. Now with all the training he's been receiving and all the progress he's made, Naruto was feeling good. Really good. He was confident and ready for a mission that would test him. So obviously he was disappointed when the Hokage announced a lousy D rank that would have them cleaning in the village. No, I'm tired of D missions. Give us AC rank, old man. He shouted. Naruto, don't talk to the Hokage like that, yelled Iruka as he leaned over the desk, who was there oftentimes to help distribute the missions to the teams. The Hokage, however, waved Iruka off. It's okay, Iruka. I wouldn't expect Naruto to change his ways after so many years. After a quick explanation of how mission rankings work in accordance with ninja rankings, Naruto was still obstinate in his choice. He wanted AC rank, damn it. Fine. How does everyone else on the team feel about this? Asked the Hokage. Do all of you feel you're ready for AC rank? Naruto and Sasuke immediately nodded, and seeing Sasuke's nod, Sakura nodded as well. The Hokage sighed and rubbed his temples, before finally agreeing. This mission is to protect a bridge builder from bandits and other such dangers while he is building a bridge essential to his village's well-being in Wave. I hope all of you will act professionally and take this assignment very seriously while you are representing Konoha. The Hokage looked them each in the eyes carefully to make his point before he turned to Iruka. Alright, Iruka, please go get Tazuna-san. Iruka nodded and left the room, returning shortly with an older man who wobbled on his feet, holding a large bottle of sake. He eyed Team 7 when he entered. I'm going to be protected by you brats. I doubt you guys could handle the job. Especially the short one with the freaky face. He slurred. Why you? Naruto began to charge the old man, only to be stopped by Kakashi. I can understand your concern, sir, but I am a Junin of Konoha, and I can promise you that no harm will come to you while you're under my protection, he said. Turning towards his genin team, he told them to get their things and meet him and Tazuna at the East Gate in an hour. Tazuna and Kakashi walked out of the Hokage's office shortly after, and immediately headed towards the gate. An uncomfortable silence followed them. So, you're a Junin at this village, eh? asked the bridge builder. Kakashi just kept walking, having already pulled out his orange book. Tazuna's sweat dropped. Are you listening? Still no answer from the masked ninja. This will be a long trip, thought Tazuna. Quote colon 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 quote. Naruto, meanwhile, was running back to his apartment to pack his things, some clothes, a tiny bit of food for himself, and some spare ninja supplies. After he finished that, he quickly locked up and hurried off to find Kurenai Sensei. He needed to tell her that he wouldn't be in Konoha for a little bit. He eventually found her, and Team 8 training together, so he realized he only had two choices: barge in on their training and come up with a lie on why he was talking with a Junin instructor of a different team, or find Anko. He didn't have any way to find Anko though. He didn't know enough about her. So he stood for a moment, thinking on how to approach the issue. If he just left, Kurenai would get mad at him for not being at the training grounds when she had told him to be there. If he barged in, the secret that she was helping him train would be out. Suddenly, Akamaru barked, and Kiba announced in his loud voice, "Someone is here, guys. I think it smells like." At that point, Naruto just jumped out. It was now or nothing. "Hi, guys," he yelled stupidly, trying to buy time to think. "What are you guys up to? What does it look like, idiot?" "We're training," snarled Kiba. "And don't interrupt." "Why, you bastard." Naruto charged at Kiba, who smirked, and got into a stance. Hinata, however, stood in the way. "Stop it," she shouted, a bit uncharacteristically. Naruto didn't have any time to avoid crashing into Hinata, since he'd already gotten enough speed that he couldn't stop so quickly. He bowled over her and the two fell into a heap on the ground with Hinata on top. "Hey, what do you think you're doing, Dobi?" roared Kiba, taking a few steps forward. "Don't hurt Hinata like that, you bastard." He was held back by Shino, however. "Stop it, Kiba." Hinata and Naruto didn't quite realize most of this though. Naruto was panicking that he might have hurt Hinata, who he realized had never done anything to him, while Hinata was simply having trouble taking in the fact that she was straddling Naruto's waist in a pretty compromising position. She turned bright red, and once Naruto asked her if she was alright, it was too much. She fainted, right on top of her crush. "Hinata?" asked Naruto, shaking her. "Hinata. She fainted. I didn't mean to hurt her like that. Honest." Shino and Kurenai both shook their heads at Naruto's obliviousness, while Kiba simply snarled, "You idiot, I can't believe you hurt her. I swear I'll tear you to shreds if we get to fight." "Kiba, be quiet please," said Kurenai. "Naruto, why are you here?" At that, Naruto remembered what his original reason for coming here was. "Well, I did buy plenty of time for myself, but I forgot to think of a plan." Well, you see, Kurenai Sensei. I'm going on a mission with Team 7. We're heading to Wave," he explained, deciding to just tell her what was going on. Now he needed to think of a reason to explain why he was telling Kurenai Sensei this. Luckily, Kurenai already caught on. "Oh, so Kakashi sent you to tell me that your team won't be able to spar with us today. Alright, well then, perhaps when Team 7 gets back you can find us for a friendly spar." Naruto sent Kurenai a grateful look, which she answered with a kind smile and a barely perceptible wink, and the blonde-haired genin sped off towards the eastern gate. When he'd finally reached the gate, everyone was already there waiting for him. "I knew the weird-faced kid was no good," muttered Tazuna. Naruto ignored him. "Alright, it's about 2 days until we reach Wave if we keep a steady pace, so let's head out now so we get the most of the day," said Kakashi, already pulling out his book and walking off in the direction of Wave. The others all looked at each other before walking off to follow him. Sasuke fell in a steady pace just behind Kakashi, hands in his pockets and staring straight ahead, carefully ignoring anything Sakura said. For herself, Sakura chose to walk alongside Sasuke and constantly make conversation, oftentimes centering around Sasuke's skill as a ninja. That left Naruto in the rear, along with Tazuna. Neither of them spoke for a while, both of them content to be left alone. Naruto was busy looking around, taking in the village surroundings, while Tazuna simply watched the antics of Team 7 like it was some form of entertainment. Perhaps it was. Eventually, Tazuna walked up to talk with Kakashi, while Naruto was left to his own thoughts again. He still hadn't managed to bring out the Kyuubi's chakra, and he'd refused to negotiate with the fox to have it tell him how to use it, since the fox wanted him to tear off a portion of the seal. He didn't have to talk to the old man to tell him that couldn't be a good deal. It wasn't long before the team came upon a puddle. None of them thought much about it, though all of them had an odd sense of foreboding. Only Kakashi knew exactly what the puddle meant, and prepared properly for it. After they had passed by it, Naruto felt two people coming up behind them, and all three of the genin and Tazuna turned just in time to see two ninjas with masks covering their faces throw a chain around a still unsuspecting Kakashi, wrapping him tightly in their chain. They yanked it hard and Kakashi's eyes widened as he was ripped to shreds before his genin team's very eyes. "Kakashi-sensei!" screamed Sakura, already knowing that the situation was way over their heads. "One down!" echoed the two ninjas, turning their eyes towards Naruto. Naruto, however, was still shell-shocked at the death of their sensei. Sasuke saw this, and quickly pinned the ninjas, chained to a tree with his shuriken and kunai, and shoved Sakura in front of Tazuna. "Watch the old man," he ordered, taking charge of the situation. He jumped up on top of the chain and kicked both of the ninjas, who detached the chain from their arm and made a beeline for Naruto and Sakura. The one charging Naruto managed to make a stab into Naruto's hand before he came to his senses, and fought back. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he shouted, forming three clones around him. They charged at the ninja, who managed to take out two quickly, but not the third, as he had to block several kunai that the real Naruto had thrown, and got hit hard because of it. He hit a tree trunk behind him and suddenly Sasuke was there as well, holding a kunai to the man's neck. For Sakura, all she could do was pull out a kunai and wait for the other ninja to reach her. She had no way to handle this, and she knew it. Luckily, before the ninja had reached her, Kakashi was there, quickly knocking out the ninja and then turning to the one that Sasuke and Naruto had cornered and knocking out the other ninja that Sasuke had pinned to the tree. "Good job, Sasuke." "Sakura," said Kakashi calmly. "You also, Naruto, although I wish you hadn't gotten hurt. It's good Sasuke managed to get the kunai against his neck, or you may have been more hurt by the time you were able to finish him." Naruto bristled at the condescending manner in which Kakashi spoke. As if he was only still standing because the great Sasuke came to his rescue. "But Kakashi-sensei, how are you alive? We saw you get caught in that chain," asked Sakura. "Ah, well, I just used a simple kawarimi, Sakura. Now, more importantly, I have some questions for you, Tazuna. You see, I purposely stayed out of the fight so that I could see who the target was. Konoha ninjas, are you? Given the situation, I don't think it was the former. That leaves you. This is clearly above AC rank, since we're encountering enemy ninja. Care to explain?" At this, Tazuna fell to his knees, and explained everything. "Please. My country is poor, and my bridge is the only way to help the situation by bringing in more trade. The ninjas are being sent by a businessman who wants to stop me, but I beg you, I need your protection. I couldn't afford more than AC rank." Kakashi nodded slowly. "I see. Nevertheless, you lied about the mission, meaning we have no obligation to complete it, and with Naruto injured and probably poisoned by the blade." He trailed off when Naruto suddenly plunged a kunai into his hand, draining the poison quickly. Everyone stared at the sudden move. We can go on with the mission now, right, Kakashi-sensei? He asked. Kakashi nodded. We still need to bandage your wound though. Here, let me. He once again trailed off in shock as he knelt to see the wound already healing over, evidence of the Kyuubi inside him. Still, he bandaged it so that the rest of Team 7 wouldn't see. Alright, I'll give you guys the same choice the Hokage gave you. Do you all want to go? Seeing them all nod, Kakashi sighed in resignation. Fine. But I'm going to request some backup from Konoha. Saying this, Kakashi cut his thumb on the tip of a kunai and performed some hand seals. Kuchio's no jutsu. A puff of smoke appeared, and when it faded, a small dog was sitting there, looking up at Kakashi. Yo, it said, raising a paw in greeting. The Genin team stared, and Kakashi introduced them. Pakken, this is my Genin team, Uchiha Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto. Team, this is Pakken. They greeted each other awkwardly before Kakashi continued. Pakken, I need you to run back to Konoha and ask the Hokage for some backup. It seems there are enemy nin involved. Also send an Anbu to pick up 2 missing nin. I believe they are known as the Demon Brothers. Pakken nodded and ran off, leaving Team 7 to turn and continue on their way to Wave. Later, the Hokage heard a knock at his door, and 2 Chunin came in to see him. Hokage-sama, they said in unison, bowing. Yes, he asked, putting his paperwork aside for a moment, and shutting a drawer, which had, unknown to the Chunin, been concealing his ICHA Paradise book. We just received a report from Kakashi-san via Pakken, his summon, that he has encountered enemy ninja in the mission, and that he requests some backup. He has decided to continue the mission with his team, said one Chunin. The Hokage raised an eyebrow. He's continuing the mission with the Genin. Did he say why he decided to do that? The Chunin shook their heads. No, Hokage-sama, answered one. He also asked to have an Anbu pick up 2 knocked out demon brothers and bring them back to Ibiki. If I may suggest, Hokage-sama, I would send someone of equal caliber as Kakashi to back up Team 7. The Hokage nodded. I agree. I already have someone in mind to send. He wrote out a mission assignment quickly, and handed it to one of the Chunin. He looked at it and raised an eyebrow at the name on it. Are you sure she's a good choice? The Hokage nodded. Yes. Give her the mission assignment and inform her that I want her to be in Wave as quickly as possible. Both Chunin snapped to attention, putting their heels together and straightening up. Hi, Hokage-sama.